Yo, once again, it's on. Back at you one more again. Real Kids TV and the House Like Kitchen Sinks. Hopefully, you like the video. Feel free to comment, definitely share, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and be sure to hit that post notification. So, anytime I bring you this action and this heat, guess what? You're amongst the first to receive. Now, with no further ado, let's get into this afternoon's video, if you will. 3:55 Wednesday afternoon. I got about an hour or so before I go in for the evening shift. And I wanted to share this story with you all if you're unfamiliar. It's an individual, he's a black man, Marcellus Williams. Give you a little insight about this situation and about this man. In 1998, unfortunately, it was a young lady by the name of Felicia Gale. Her friends, people close to her, they called her Alicia. She was a former reporter in St. Louis City, Missouri. And unfortunately, she was murdered, brutally murdered. She was stabbed 43 times in her home. And when her husband arrived at their home, that's when he had to discover this brutal crime scene. I can't imagine walking into any environment, any place, dwelling, situation, and seeing someone that's been stabbed 43 times. Just anyone. But in this particular situation, it happened to be his wife. Who would do something like that? Who would commit such a heinous act towards anyone? Upon the police investigation, they didn't have a lot to go by at the time. They found a knife, which the knife was still lodged into, Mrs. Felicia Gale's neck. And they found a bloody shoe print. There were two individuals that implicated Mr. Marcellus Williams. Two people. One was a former cellmate, and the other one was a ex-girlfriend, in which she was badly addicted to drugs. They weren't there at the actual, crime scene or what have you, but they told the police in exchange for $10,000 each, and they were also cleared of any wrongdoings as far as separate crimes that they were charged with. They told the police that Marcellus Williams admitted to them that he murdered Mrs. Felicia Gale. Based upon that, an arrest was made on Marcellus Williams, and he was charged with murder. They didn't just charge him with, a regular murder. He was actually charged with capital murder, in which the death penalty was, it was in place. The prosecutor, he pushed for the death penalty every time he was interviewed. Any opportunity that he had to speak in front of the media, he pushed the death penalty. When in 2001, Mr. Marcellus Williams was convicted by a jury and sentenced to death. Now, I will say this. When they arrested, Marcellus Williams, they did find the lady's laptop that she had. It was in his possession. So what made it a death penalty case? Because it was a robbery murder. Her purse was missing and her laptop was missing. They found his laptop in his possession. So that didn't look very favorable to a jury, I would imagine. From what I'm being able to gather, in St. Louis City or County, Missouri, rather, predominantly black. It's a predominantly black, city. But interestingly enough, out of 12 jurors, there was only one black juror rather. The remaining 11 jurors were white. The prosecution went above and beyond to have 6 black jurors disqualified from being on the jury. See, a lot of people don't understand that when you're dealing with trials, the prosecution, they do whatever they can do to have the black people removed from the jury. If it's a black person that's actually being charged, which typically that's what it is. If it's a black person being charged with a crime, they don't want black people on the jury because supposedly blacks are more empathetic and sympathetic to other blacks. So they don't want them on the jury. On the jury, rather. So that's why 9 times out of 10, when you go to trial, you're going to have an all-white jury. You might luck up and get one black juror. But typically, you're going to have an all-white jury. Which is highly, highly unfair. That's not right whatsoever. If you're there and you're eligible to be a juror, then you should be a juror. So, when he goes to the trial, what have you, other than the laptop that they found, and you got to understand this too. When you live in a life, Mr. Marcellus Williams, he wasn't necessarily an angel. I'm not saying that he had the most integrity in the world. He was living a squeaky clean life. And when you live in that type of lifestyle, you run across things such as stolen goods, stolen items. You may have a PlayStation that you bought for $50 off the streets, $100 off the streets, a stolen laptop, or someone owes you some money, or you have drugs, you're selling drugs, so I don't got no money, but I got this laptop. Those type of things happen. It's unfortunate, but they happen. So I can see where you would end up with stolen goods. That's why they have a charge that's called receiving stolen property. It happens. A car. Now, cars are a little ridiculous because you got to put the title in your name and, things like that. But typically when you buy something off the streets and you buy really, really cheap jewelry or something like that, you know that it's probably hot. But hey, people still do it anyway. Other than that, the bloody shoe print that I mentioned, it didn't have his DNA. They never found any shoes or anything like that or any clothes that contained blood on it when they, upon searching his home. And in addition, the shoe size wasn't even his shoe size. So it's like saying, okay, well, we found a shoe print and it's a size 11. Okay, I wear a 12 and a half. I wear a 9 and a half. So that right there should have been, that's irrelevant. The knife that they found, unfortunately, lodged into Mrs. Felicia Gale's neck, it didn't have his DNA on it. So you mean to tell me that this individual stabbed this lady 43 times, brutally stabbed her, and his DNA is nowhere on the crime scene, particularly the murder weapon? No DNA whatsoever. Even with that, as I mentioned, they still feel confident enough to go to trial. I had an attorney tell me, back in my criminal days, I had an attorney tell me that most of the time when people go to trial or when people take plea deals, it's not really about evidence. It's not about hardcore evidence. It's about circumstantial evidence. So if you have 2 people that are getting on the stand saying, he did it, that man right there, he told us this, he did it, Then the jury's going to look at the fact that how heinous the crime was. And he's a black man, is a white woman. Along with the witnesses, along with the fact that he had the laptop. Along with the fact that, he had a criminal record. Nothing violent, but he has a criminal history. By golly, George, he did it. Hanging. Think about it. Think about how much these type of things happen in this country. I know some people look at this and they don't care. But it's a fact of how many innocent people are convicted. How many innocent people are sitting on death row? How many innocent people have died and been executed for a crime that they didn't commit? In 2017, Mr. Marcellus Williams was scheduled to be executed. And thank goodness the governor did a stay of execution. Which, if you're not sure what that means, it just basically means we're not going to execute you right now. We're going to investigate a little bit more into this case. Because you may, we're not saying you are innocent, but there's a chance that you could potentially be innocent of this crime. So we're not going to execute you right now. As I mentioned, that was in 2017. You got nearly 7 years later, and Mr. Marcellus Williams is still fighting for his life. He's still on death row. As of now, there hasn't been a new execution date set. You have the Innocent Projects group that are, they're working hard for him. They're fighting for him. They're working on his case. They're trying to get anyone to listen, concerning the situation. Because I'm going to tell you what's very, very interesting. Back then, DNA wasn't really, as big as it is now. It was 1998 when this murder happened. So now with technology, they've been able to determine that the DNA that was found on the murder weapon, it wasn't Mr. Marcellus Williams. It was someone else's DNA. Now, they didn't mention if they knew exactly who the person was, because if you've never been arrested or your DNA is not in the DNA data bank or whatever they call it, then they wouldn't be able to determine exactly who it is. But they do know one thing for certain, two things for sure, that DNA was not Mr. Marcellus Williams. So one would think, okay, if it's not his DNA, won't they just release him? It just doesn't happen that easily. Like I said, back then, DNA was, it didn't really exist like that. So now they're saying that it's inadmissible. The higher courts, the appeal courts, they're saying that they can't take the fact that it wasn't his DNA into consideration because it didn't exist back then. So on something like that, you're basically saying we know that this man probably didn't do this. Most likely didn't do this. But we're not allowed to take this into consideration that this DNA on this murder weapon wasn't his. When you have witnesses that are pointing the finger at you, there's always going to be something in it for them. How do you pay people $10,000? $10,000. You get 10 grand, you get 10 grand. Credibility is nothing. But yet you put them on the stands, clean them up, put them in a suit, get their hair done, nails done, things of that nature, and the jury believes them. All white jury for 11 out of 12. We don't want no blacks on the jury because no, sir. We know that you blacks stick together. This is really, really just a sad situation. It's just sad, man. And as I mentioned, it's something that happens every single day. Um, I know that they're fighting hard. I know that they're signing petitions for him. Um, I just hope that the governor or whoever has the the powers to be, I just hope that they really, really look at this. But see, the problem is that you have these overzealous prosecutors. A prosecutor never wants to admit when they're wrong. Never. You know what their response is gonna be? Well, unfortunately, the system is, it isn't without flaws. Even with this, the prosecutor is still standing on 10 toes down that this man is guilty. How's he guilty when it's not his DNA? How you gonna stab somebody and y'all got the knife handle, it's not his DNA. But you're still convinced that this man is guilty. Because you don't want to look like a fool. You don't want to be held accountable for sending yet another person to prison for something that they didn't do. I've seen it. Now, it wasn't necessarily murder. I've seen prosecutors know that a man is 100% innocent. And instead of just dismissing the charges, they'll say, well, we'll drop it to misdemeanor. Or we'll drop it to this lower level felony. If he pleads guilty today, he can go home today. All charges drop. As far as, the additional charges. We're going to get him on something, but the rest of the charges, we'll drop those. We're going to get a conviction. And it's like, the person's like, but I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. But you're sitting there, you're working with the legal aid, a public pretender, not a public defender, a public pretender that works with them. Their whole job is to get you to plead out. Now, there are exceptions to the rule because you have some public defenders that are actually trying to go into private practice, so they're going to do the best job that they can possibly do to go ahead and establish that reputation and that name for themselves, and they're going to fight for you. But even them, it's still difficult. How you going to fight for one individual when you got 60 people on your caseload? You got 60 people on your caseload. How you going to properly prepare to go to trial for an individual that's fighting for their life? But at any rate, the prosecution, they're never going to admit that they were wrong. They will never come out and say, we sent an innocent man to jail. You know what they'll do? They'll have you sign something. They'll say, okay, if we, the conviction is going to stand, but you'll be released immediately, and you sign something stating that you can't sue us. They'll never come out and give a public apology and say that we got the wrong person. We've taken all these years from this individual, thrown him into prison when he did absolutely nothing wrong, and we are so sorry. Here's, they want to offer you something, even when they do that, $100,000, $300,000, $500,000, $750,000. I just spent 40 years in prison, 30 years in prison, 25 years in prison for a crime that I didn't commit, and you show absolutely no remorse. Non-apologetic. So that's why I always make videos talking about locking people up is a business, man. They have to get these convictions. These detectives, when they solve these big cases, then they're promoted. They're looked upon as, okay, this detective, he's the lead detective. He's the head detective. We're going to promote him to this. We're going to give him his own zone, his own team, his own division or what have you. Because he so-called solved these huge murder cases that have to be solved. The problem is, you all sending innocent people to prison. But you don't care because you go home to your family. You go home and eat at your dinner table, kick your shoes off, kick your feet up, watch the game, spend time with your kids, play with the dog, go on family vacations, summer vacations, go to soccer practice with the kids, volleyball practice. You're able to do all of these things. But while this individual, this black man, is sitting in prison, what about his family? What about his kids? What about his loved ones? What about them? Sorry, I had something in my eye. You don't care about them. because you convince yourself that this man is guilty. The system doesn't make many mistakes. That man ain't did nothing. Okay, he's guilty of having a stolen laptop. He's guilty of that. Does that mean that he stabbed her 43 times? Absolutely not. That's why money matters. In a situation where you're accused of a crime, especially a heinous crime such as this, money definitely matters. You know why? Because if you have the money to hire an attorney, if you got $100,000, you're going to hire a team. And with that team, you're going to get, probably you're going to have a lead attorney, and you're probably going to have 2 or 3 other attorneys that's working on the case. And then you're able to get your own experts. So when the state introduces their expert, you're able to bring in your own expert. But these people are not working for free. You don't got no money, you can't do that. You're relying on, like I said, a public defender that works for the people. That's just what it is. That's a little insight as far as how the system really, really works. It's best to stay out of the system. But sometimes, as you see, trouble comes to you. Trouble finds you. You pay 2 individuals $10,000 apiece. And that's admissible in court. Their testimony is admissible. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes them confidential informants, they're not lying. See, there's a difference between a rat and a confidential informant. They're the same thing, to be honest. But a person that just rats, it might just be, okay, me and you get caught up in something. I keep my mouth shut, but you tell on me. Now, he did it. That's a rat. Confidential informant is somebody, a real live confidential informant. As I mentioned, they're a rat as well. But they have a number. They have a confidential informant number. They're an employee. They're paid to give the police information. Now, this $10,000 is a little excessive. I doubt that they're, paid $10,000 on every case. So that's why I said it's very, very excessive. And the more information that you give them, the more times that they bring you a case and that you're able to solve based upon what they said, the more you're going to be paid. And the more valuable you are to them, the more reliable you are. Because you've shown several times, prior that, hey, this information that I'm giving you all is valid information. So as I said, man, they all rats. Just what it is, man. But I just wanted to bring you all this story, and I'm hoping that this guy gets some relief. I'm hoping that somebody looks at this and says, man, damn the law, man. We doing the right thing, man. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. This man has been incarcerated, sitting on death row for all of these years for a crime that he did not commit. Who's going to step forward and say, hey, we got the wrong guy. We got the wrong man. Probably nobody. And it's probably just another black man that'll be executed for absolutely nothing. Real Kens TV, man. Hopefully you like the video. Feel free to comment. Definitely share. Definitely share this. This needs to be out there. More people need to know about this situation, know about this case. I didn't know anything of it. This is the first time that I heard of it a few days ago. And, I found as much research. I did as much research and found as much information as I could possibly find on the case. People need to know about this and see exactly the injustice that's being done to people locked up here in America. It's ridiculous, man. I'm not saying everybody's innocent. Not saying everybody's angels. I'm not saying nobody deserves to be in prison. But there are so many more cases just like this. Sad, man. So like I said, definitely share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Be sure to hit the post notification. So anytime I bring you this action and this heat, guess what? You're amongst the first to receive. Free Marcellus Williams, man. Real Kens TV.